Carlos King has finally spoken up after weeks of growing tension, and what he said is now making fans question everything they thought they knew about the show. For years, Carlos was seen as the man behind the scenes pulling the strings, deciding who got screen time and who didn't. He was the name that came up every time a new cast member appeared or a familiar face disappeared. Fans believed he was the mastermind behind the entire Love and Marriage franchise. But now, after OWN made a public statement placing the blame on him for all the casting confusion and chaos, Carlos has decided it's time to clear the air that he started off by saying he didn't leave because of a scandal, even though that's what a lot of people believed. People on social media and in gossip blogs claimed he was fired or forced out because of behind-the-scenes drama. But Carlos says that's not true. He left because he wanted to start his own production company. That's it. No scandal. No one forced him out. No cast member ran him off the show. According to him, it was a decision he made to take control of his own path, but things didn't stay quiet for long. OWN released a statement that changed everything. In response to questions about who is really in charge of casting, OWN made it clear that they, not Carlos or his production company, have the final say in who joins or leaves the cast. They explained that while Carlos and other producers can suggest people for the show, OWN is the one that makes the final decision. This statement completely changed the conversation, because for years, Carlos acted like he was the one running the casting decisions, and that's where the drama really started. Fans quickly remembered all the times Carlos talked about casting like it was his personal project. In his podcast episodes, interviews, and even Instagram lives, Carlos would often talk about why certain cast members were chosen. He praised people like Stormy Steele, Destiny Payton, and Miss Wanda. He explained how they were a perfect fit for the show and how they added something special to the cast. When he spoke, it didn't sound like a producer just giving an opinion. It sounded like someone who had the power to hire and fire. Fans never questioned it back then. They believed Carlos had that control because that's how he presented himself. He would even joke about certain people not being cast because they didn't have star quality. So when someone didn't return to the show, viewers assumed Carlos made that decision. When a new face popped up, they assumed Carlos approved it. That's the image he created over the years. But now, with OWN stepping in and saying he never had that kind of power, it's confusing. If Carlos didn't have the final say, then why did he talk like he did? Why did cast members, fans, and even other producers act like he was the one calling the shots? It doesn't make sense. Something doesn't add up. Carlos is now saying that his company, Kingdom Reign Entertainment, can only suggest talent and that the network decides who actually gets cast. That may be true on paper, but fans aren't buying the full story. They've gone back and pulled receipts, old clips, social media posts, and podcast episodes, where Carlos made it sound like he had full control. That change in tone is what's causing all the confusion and suspicion. Fans are asking, was Carlos just playing up his role back then to boost his image? Or is he downplaying it now because things have gotten messy? This change didn't happen in a vacuum. It came after Martell Holt's legal trouble hit the headlines. Martell was arrested for harassment-related charges, and fans were furious. They started demanding that he be removed from the show. They wanted someone held accountable. Since Carlos had always been seen as the face of the show and the person in control, all eyes turned to him. Fans expected him to make a statement or take action. But instead, Carlos started distancing himself, saying it wasn't his decision to make. That switch felt sudden. For years, he had no problem taking credit for casting decisions. He would talk about how hard it was to find good cast members, how he worked to build the franchise, and how he turned people into stars. But now, with controversy circling, he was acting like he was just the messenger. It didn't sit right with the audience. It felt like he wanted all the credit when things were good, but none of the responsibility when things went wrong. OWN's statement didn't help him either. In fact, it made things worse. By saying publicly that Carlos didn't have control over casting, they were basically throwing him under the bus. It made him look like he had been misleading people all along. But that raised another question: why did OWN let him do that for so long? If Carlos was never really the final decision-maker, why didn't the network correct that image earlier? Why wait until things got messy to clear it up? The answer might lie in how reality TV works behind the scenes. Carlos's company may not have the final say, but they do play a huge role in casting. Court documents and behind-the-scenes info show that Kingdom Reign is involved in recruiting, interviewing, and selecting potential cast members before OWN approves them. That means Carlos still holds influence, even if he doesn't officially make the final call. Cast members themselves have said Carlos was the one who approached them. Melody Holt and Martel have both said that Carlos came to them with the idea for the show. Stormy Steele has said that Carlos reached out to her about joining. Destiny Payton talked about how Carlos convinced her that reality TV was a good move. These aren't just rumors. These are statements from the people who were on the show. They saw Carlos as the one in charge, and it wasn't just the cast. Fans also picked up on the dynamic. When cast members wanted to stay on the show or get more screen time, they acted like they had to impress Carlos, not the network. They thanked him publicly when things went well. They listened to his advice. They tried to stay on his good side. That doesn't happen unless people truly believe he has power. So now, fans are left wondering who's telling the truth. Is Carlos stepping back because he doesn't want the blame for casting decisions like keeping Martel on the show? Or is OWN trying to protect itself from backlash and legal issues by shifting the blame to Carlos? It could be both. One theory is that Carlos did have more control in the early days of the franchise. But once legal issues started popping up, especially with cast members getting into serious trouble, OWN decided to step in and make the final calls. Maybe Carlos is stepping back now to avoid being blamed for keeping controversial figures on the show. That would explain why he's suddenly so focused on saying he doesn't have the final say. Another theory is that OWN is trying to avoid lawsuits. Reality TV has gotten messy over the years, and more people are starting to speak out about what happens behind the scenes. If OWN wants to limit its legal responsibility, they may be drawing a clear line between themselves and the producers. By saying Carlos only suggests cast members, they're creating distance from the drama. But that still doesn't explain why they let Carlos take credit for years without saying anything. There's also a third possibility. Maybe neither Carlos nor OWN has full control. In reality TV, there are often more people involved than we see. There could be talent scouts, background investigators, legal teams, and executives making casting decisions behind closed doors. If that's the case, then Carlos may not have been lying, he just wasn't telling the whole story. But that still creates confusion for fans, because it's hard to hold someone accountable when no one wants to admit they're in charge. All of this has left fans feeling frustrated. Reality TV is supposed to feel real. When producers change the narrative behind the scenes, it damages trust. Fans spend time and energy following these shows, investing in the stories and the people. When the people behind the show start playing the blame game, it takes away from the experience. Carlos King built his brand on being bold, honest, and in control. He called himself the king of reality TV. He said he created stars and shaped stories. But now, when controversy shows up, he's saying it's not up to him. OWN, on the other hand, stayed silent while Carlos built that image. They let him be the face of casting until it got risky. Only now are they stepping in to set the record straight. It feels like both sides are trying to protect themselves, and the fans are caught in the middle. People want answers. They want to know who's really in charge. And they want to know why they were led to believe something that may not have been true. At the end of the day, this situation goes beyond one producer or one cast member. It's about how reality shows are made and how much fans are told. When producers act like they run the show but then back away when things go wrong, it creates doubt. And when networks stay silent until it's convenient to speak up, it makes fans feel like they've been played dead. So now, the question is simple but important: who's really making the decisions? And more importantly, who should be held responsible when things go wrong? Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you believe Carlos had more control than he's admitting now? Or do you think OWN is rewriting history to cover their own tracks? There's a lot of smoke here, but the truth still isn't clear. Stay tuned, because if this drama is any sign, more receipts might be coming soon.